All right, Rabbi, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our TAMLUD TORAH sponsor, an anonymous sponsorship with Hakaras Hatov to Hashem for all of the blessings He has bestowed upon us, and for the refuah Shleima for Devorah Leah bas Chaya Rivka. May we zoche Hashem to witness the imminent coming of mashiach. Rabbi Amenu. Amen. On our week of learning, sponsors Ariel and Hayley Lichterman in memory of Hayley's mother, Linda Koteen, zichron livracha. We hope that in the merit of our TAMLUD TORAH, the neshama will have an aliyah, the family ein nechama, and of course, as always, we dedicate our learning in the schus of our precious hostages. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu bring them home b'shalom and b'karov, and the schus of our soldiers, our brave soldiers. May they have hatzlacha b'chol ma'aseh yadehem, and may they too, Mirat Hashem, come back to their families b'shalom and b'karov. We'll say with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today, but in Mirat Hashem, we're going to be great. So today's daf is Ayin Zayin 77, and we are picking up on 76b Ayin Rav Amud Beis, second wide line, Ketzad. So I will say we're going to do some really interesting cases today. And again, obviously, I will say, the challenging part of these Gemaras is what we're going to try to be able to do is learn principles and hopefully figure out, again, how to apply those principles to specific cases. But obviously, there's such a range of specific cases. But Emir Hashem, let's go. Ketzad. So Gemara says again, how do we apply the previously aforementioned concepts? Kiblu kama liktsa b'shnei slams. So here we go. Let's say I hired workers to go ahead and cut down wheat for 2 slime. And remember again, it's going to be important. Just remember one simple ratio. A selah is 4 dinar. Just remember that. As long as you know that, you're good to go for the rest of the case. So I hire workers to go ahead and cut my field, harvest my field for 2 slime, 8 dinarim. 8 dinarim cuts through chatzia ve'nichu chatzia. So what happens? So now the workers came along, and the workers harvested half and they left half. So essentially, they did half the job. So I'll say, by the way, I just want to say, this is, as I just say, a nice Shaya Kachaya. When we first moved to Baltimore, and we were living on Wallace Avenue, we hired someone. This is such a good lesson. We got a recommendation from someone who does work cheap. Now, as we all learn over the course of life, right? When that's the way someone is sold to you, that's the way they work cheap. Okay, when you're young, that's so they did literally. So we hired them to do siding on the house. They literally did siding on half the house, and then stopped showing up. So literally said, no, we're not coming anymore. Like mamish. Sometimes people make excuses. They said we're not coming anymore. That's it. So that's this case. So I hire workers to go ahead and harvest my field. They do half the field. Or beged lerod b'shnei slime. Argu chatzia ve'nichu chatzia. I will say, but it's not lav dafka. It's an agricultural case. I hire a craftsman, a weaver, to go ahead and weave a garment. He weaved half of it, and he left half of it unwoven. Okay, so we'll say, now what's the shaila? Someone does half a job. We'll say there's 2 pieces at play over here. What are the 2 pieces at play? Number 1, the person did work. Right? The work they did has a value. What's the problem, however? Right? I have to get the rest of the job done, which means now that's what? I'm going to have to hire someone else. So now the Gemara says as follows. So we're going to see now there's a machlokes in the Tanakama and Rabbi Dos about what we do. So Shaman Lahan esma sha'asu. So therefore, so the Tanakama says, look, we assess how the value of the work that they did. So that's it. So in other words, we look at how much work they did and we pay them for their work. What about the following? Haya yafa shisha dinarim. So we'll say, here's the issue. What happens if halacha l'maisa? Now they did half the job. So I hired workers to go ahead and, so watch this. I hired workers to go ahead and harvest my field. When I hired them, the job was worth 8 dinar. That was the job. 2 slime, 8 dinar. Fine. They do half the job. So we'll say, so now what's the problem? The price of labor has gone up. So now, what used to cost 4 dinar for half a field now costs what? 6 dinar. So we'll say, so now I have a problem, because now for me to get the rest of the job done is going to cost me 2 additional dinar. So what's the shaila? Who bears that cost? So the Gemara says, so you have a shish dinar No sin lahem sela. O yigmeru malachton v'itlu shnei slaim. So ultimately, again, so we'll say, so now even though the price of labor went up, I still have to pay them for the amount of work that they did in accordance with, right, the value of the amount that I hired them. So I have to pay them a sela, right? I have to go ahead and pay them the sela, the 4 dinarim, right? Or they can go ahead and finish the job and take the 2 slaim of the salary. Them sela, no saying slow them sela. And if it was a sela, you give them a sela. The Gemara is going to ask what that last line means. So we'll say, the Tanna Kama holds that halacha l'maisa, when the workers stop mid-job, I have to pay them for what they did. And even though now the price of labor has gone up, so it's going to cost me more to finish that job, that's my problem, that's not their problem. Rashi points out over here, that the shita of the Tanna Kama is yad polim al ha'alyona. Workers always have the upper hand. The system protects the workers. So essentially the workers are always entitled to get paid for whatever amount of work they did. So even though they walked off the job mid-job, they are entitled to go ahead and get paid for what they did. And even though now it's going to cost me more money to finish the job, that's my problem, not their problem. I have to eat that additional cost. Incredible. Okay, so we'll say that's the Tanna Kama. Rabbi Dosa comes along and says no. Shamin lohen masha asade asos. So we'll say Rabbi Dosa says yes, I absolutely have to pay the workers for the work that they did, but I am allowed to take into account how much money it's going to cost me to finish the job now that they are walking off the job. So we'll say take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, if you take a look, Rashi here is about 10 lines up from the bottom. Shaman lahem ha'asid leha asos. Rabbi Dosa svir leketana didan da amar hochzer bo yada ala tachtona v'akiv schar masha asu kedei liskar polim ligmar kfitina rishon. So we're going to see over here, Rabbi Dosa holds like this. Rabbi Dosa holds, whoever, like the Mishnah says, whoever changes the terms of employment has the lower hand. Right? So Rabbi Dosa says like this. I hire the workers to go ahead and harvest my field for 2 slaim, 8 dinarim. They do half a job. Now they walk off. So Rabbi Dosa says, here's what we're going to do is we're going to see how much money it's going to cost me to go ahead and finish harvesting the field. So hayayaf shisha dinarim. So therefore, again, I will say, so if it's going to cost me another 6 dinar to go ahead and finish harvesting the field, no sin lahem shekel, o yigmeru malachton v'yitlu shnei slaim. So what Rabbi Dosa says like this. Rabbi Dosa says, do I have to pay them for the work that they did? Absolutely. But before I pay them, I look at how much it's going to cost me to finish the job. And if the price of labor has gone up, that additional cost comes out of their fee. They have to eat the rise in labor costs, and I just pay them the difference. Bimsela, or of course, they could always finish the job. And if they finish the job, what do they get paid? The original contracted amount. Vimsela, no sin lemsela. Again, we're going to see exactly what that last line means. So we'll say, so this, I just want to point out over here, this is a really lemaisa machlokes over here, right? I hire workers to do a job, and again, the Gemara's example is they did half the job, but of course you understand, it doesn't matter if they did half the job, a third of the job, the quarter job, the halacha is the same, or the machlokes is the same. Right? So we'll say, so let's say again, I hire them to do a job, in the Gemara's case, for 2 slaim. They go ahead, they do half the job, which means they've done a sala's worth of work. Then what's the problem? The problem is it's going to cost me more than a sela to finish the job, to hire new workers and finish the job. Tanna Kama says, that's my problem. I pay the workers the sela, the workers are done, they have a right to walk off whenever they want, right? They're entitled to the sela for their salary, and I have to eat the additional rise in labor costs. Rabbi Dosa says, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I have to pay them for the work that they did, but if labor costs went up, that's on them, because they're walking off the job. What's the fundamental machlokes? Tanna Kama holds, yad polim al ha'alyona. The worker always has the upper hand. Now, why that is, we'll have to see. Right? Rabbi Dosa is our Mishnah. And what does our Mishnah say? Kol meshane yodo ala tachtona. When you engage in an employment agreement, or any agreement for that matter, and you go ahead and you change the terms of the agreement, you have the lower hand. So mostly that's our machlokes. Now, a very important qualification. When is this so? B'davar she'ein ovid. Now, both say, all of this is assuming that we're talking about something that's what? Where the job is not a davara ovid. So let's remember again, what does that mean? A Devorah Ovid means it's something that has to get done now, and if it's not done now, there's going to be a loss. Because I will say, the whole chap over here is because of that, so that's our machlokes. So because, in other words, in a non-Devorah Ovid scenario, when workers walk off the job, I have the luxury of finding new workers. And if I don't find someone today, I'll find someone tomorrow, and it's fine, it doesn't make a difference. Aval b'Devorah Ovid, socher alein omatan. I'll say, when we're talking about a Devorah Ovid, everyone agrees that by Devorah Ovid, I could hire new workers immediately, and if the price of labor goes up, that cost is borne by the workers, right? Because we'll say, when you walk off a job on a Devorah Ovid, you are leaving the employer in a financially precarious situation, and he is permitted to do whatever he needs to do in order to stave off the loss, and the workers have to bear that cost. Oh, mitan, or you could trick the workers into finishing the job. So the Gemara says, Kates and mitan, so how can you deceive them? So it's interesting. In other words, essentially the Gemara says, you could lie and tell them you're going to pay them more in order to get them to finish the job. And then when they finish the job, you could pay them what they were originally contracted to do. And we'll say, that's because they have an obligation to honor their commitment. So if you need to tell them something different in order to go ahead and get them to work, to do the job, then Lamaisi, you are allowed to do that. So the Gemara says, I will say now, again, you could even hire new workers in order to get the job done because it is a shtickle emergency situation. How much more, like above market, can you hire workers and cause them to bear the cost? Ad arboim v'chamishim zuz. 40 and 50 zuz more. So let's say the discussion exactly whether or not this is an exact amount, or whether or not it's just saying that even for significantly more, you could force them to bear the cost. But the idea, again, we don't have to wade into that right now. But the idea over here is that if you hire workers, they walk off the job on a Devorah Ovid, you could hire workers, even though, again, because you're hiring them last minute, because, people recognize that you're in a difficult position, they may take advantage of that and charge you more money, you could pass that cost along to the workers who walked off. Incredible. When is this so? Bisman shein shampalim liskar. Further, I will say, when is this so? I will say, so again, now Rashi says over here, De'ein ha'chozer nifsad el lefi cheshbon l'Rabbi Dosa u'l'Rabbanon mekalben b'masha asu. So I will say, furthermore, again, when was the original machlokes Rabbi Dosa and the Rabbanon? Bisman she'in shampalim liskar. So I will say, that's when there's not workers immediately available to hire. Aval ni shampalim liskar va'omer tzei b'sachar me'elu ein lo alen ela taromes. So I will say, this is very important. When is there the original? Now again, remember, let's go back for just a second. Now the way we're framing it is the machlokes Rabban and Rabbi Dosa is by something that is not a Devorah Ovid. So we'll say, let's assume for a moment right now that when harvesting a field, you have a prolonged amount of time to get that done. Let's just make that assumption for now. So I hire workers to go ahead and harvest my field. I hire them for 2 slime. They do half the job and now they walk off. Okay, so now machlokes Rabbanon and Rabbi Dosa. What's the machlokes? So now the price of labor goes up. The Rabbanon say, too bad. Tanakama says, too bad, that's on me, the employer, and I just have to bear it and pay the workers the one seller for the job that they did. Right? Rabbi Dosa, absolutely not. Rabbi Dosa, any increase in labor could be passed off to the workers who walked off. Now the Gemara qualifies that again and says, that's only true if new workers are not readily available. In other words, we'll say, if at the end of the day, farmhands, right, or people to harvest my field are readily available, then everyone agrees, move on. Okay, they walked off the job, assuming that they're readily available. And also when we say readily available also means that what? The assumption is same price. So in other words, if all I have from this is a headache, so okay, I'm annoyed. The workers walked off the job. You shouldn't walk off a job, but they did. But I could easily find new workers, and I could easily find them at the same price. Everyone agrees. All you have is taromas, right? All you have is the right to be bragas. You have the right to be bragas. So you could be upset that these workers are not good guys. Fine, but that's it. But other than that, you have no other legal recourse. Okay, so really fascinating machlokes, and now again, 3 parts to this machlokes, Rabbi Dosa and the Tanakama. So here we go. Tani Tanakali Durav. So we'll say, so they taught the following teaching in front of Rav. Good, so much to do over here. Fine. Okay, so let's go. So Tani Tanakali Durav. No sin lahem scharan mishalim. So we'll say, now we're going back a little bit over here. So the Gemara says, so remember again in yesterday's Gemara, we saw Rashi points out over Tani Tana, it's about 6 lines up. So we'll say, remember again, we had this case. I hire a donkey driver to transport goods from point A to point B. So I hire him on Tuesday, and then what happens on Wednesday morning? He shows up, and the goods are not there. The goods aren't ready. So what's the halacha? So I have to pay him full wages. Right? Because again, I will say, that's on me. I didn't have the goods ready. I have to pay him full wages. So listen to this. So they taught this halacha in front of Rav. Amar Lei. So Rav said, Chavivi Amar. Chavivi is my uncle, right? My uncle Rabbi Chia. My uncle said, Ilu ana Havai. If I was there, lo havi yehivna lahen elaki poel batal. Va'at amrat lahen no sin schar mishalim. So Rav says the name of his uncle Rabbi Chia, that my uncle said, if I was there when they were teaching this halacha, I would have said, the most you have to pay the donkey driver is kipoel batal. Remember again, we had this. What does it mean, poel batal? Poel batal is, we ask a person, how much money would you accept to not have to work? In other words, let's say I get paid $100 for a particular task. So then the poel batal means, we assume everybody has a price, right? How much money, obviously would be less money, how much less money would you accept to not have to work? To stay home for that day. So Rabbi Chia said, when the donkey driver shows up and the goods are not there, why do you have to pay him his full wage? He didn't do anything. At most, you have to pay him kipol batal. So the Gemara says, Va'at amr no'osin lam schar shlayim. You guys are saying you have to pay the full wage. That doesn't make any sense. Va'alach, we learned, Eina dome habatal v'habal reikan. Osem alacha liyoshivu batal. So we'll say, but 1 second, we said that. We actually said that was the halacha. The halacha is, you're right, of course, we don't pay the donkey. When the donkey driver shows up and there's no goods to move, we don't pay him the full wage. Rather, we pay him kipol batal. So Rabbi Chia, what are you getting upset about? Lo seglo kameh. Rabbi Chia, they didn't finish the ruling in front of Rabbi Chia. So Rabbi Chia didn't hear everything. That's why he was objecting. Okay. So we'll say, so by the way, this is very important, that halacha l'maaseh, this seems to me that the Gemara is going. So in other words, I hired the donkey driver to transport goods from point A to point B. Shows up at my house the next morning, and I'm not ready for him. I'm not ready for him to do the job. So we'll say, so now I have to pay him because I hired him. But I don't have to pay him as if he transported the goods, because he didn't transport the goods. Instead, I have to pay him kipoel batal. So we'll say, we're going to see this concept of kipoel batal is almost like when you have to pay someone because you engage them to do a service, and you're at fault that the service didn't materialize. But at the same time, they didn't provide the service. So to pay someone for something they didn't do, the halacha doesn't really see as a necessity. But to recognize that you've taken up their time, that you have to do. You have to pay. So there's this thing called poel batal. How much money would a person accept not to have to engage in this strenuous activity? Okay, let's go weiter. Says the Gemara. Ikadamri, another alternate version of this. Saime kamei. No, they finished the ruling in front of them. Vachi kamar. Chavivi Amar. Rav said, my uncle Rabbi Chia said, Ihavi ana lo havi yehidna le klal. So Rabbi Chia was actually saying, if I was there, I wouldn't have given the donkey driver a cent, nothing. Va'at amritz kipol batal, and you say you have to pay my kipol batal. Elakashya, hachlo kashya, had desari le'ari mid'arta, had delo sari le'ari mid'arta. So Rabbi said this is very interesting, and maybe there's a fundamental distinction between when you went ahead and, we'll say, let's talk about for a moment just like an agricultural case. Let's talk about a case where I hired workers to go ahead and work a field. And then they show up the next morning, and what happens? The field is too wet. And they can't do the work. So the Gemara says like this, so now the workers show up for work the next morning. Shabbos says, do I have to pay them or not? So the Gemara suggests maybe there's a fundamental distinction. When the workers came the night before to see the field, right? And they saw that this is, now I will say, apparently, so I guess in agriculture, right? Workers could see that this is the type of field that if it gets wet, we're not going to be able to work it. So if they saw the field the night before, and they recognize that there's a strong possibility that if this gets wet, we can't do the work the next morning, and they show up the next morning, and they can't work the field, that's on them. That's on them, and I don't owe them anything. Versus a case where I hire them to work the field, they didn't see the field the night before, so they have no idea. They have no idea. And halacha l'maisa, then they show up the next morning, and the field is wet. In a case like that, I would be obligated to pay them. Now, what would I be obligated to pay them? Kepoah bottle, right? Not a full, complete wage, but rather, again, kepoah bottle. Very interesting. The Gemara says, Kihada Amar Rava, as Rava said, Hayman da agar Ariel Hayley Lichterman. So we'll listen to this. I hired someone to go ahead and dig a ditch. Va'asim mal yamaya. O Saira la'ara me'arta. So we'll say, so now watch this. So I go ahead and I hire them to work the field. And what happens? So now the rain came and filled up the field. So therefore, again, the work is impossible. So we'll say, this is a good shaila. So now the worker shows up. Do I have an obligation to pay them or not? Now the worker's there. The worker's there early. The worker's there ready to work, but he can't work the field. So am I obligated to pay him? So Gemara says, it depends. Isaira la'are me'arta. If I showed him the field the night before, right? Then I will say top of Ayin 77a. Then Gemara says psida depolim. Then that's on him. That's on him. Then I will say because halacha l'maisa, he should have known that again, this is the type of field that if it rains, you can't work it. You can't work it. So therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, that's going to be on him. Lo saril arim arta. If I did not show him the field the night before, then psida de balabayis v'yav like a poa bottle. Then we'll say, in other words, if I didn't show him the field before, and therefore again he has no idea what to expect, he's just showing up for work, then that's on me. However, I will say this is very important. However, I have to pay him, but I don't have to pay him the wage as if he did the job. I have to pay him kipoah bottle. So you begin to see this model in halacha where when someone shows up to do a job that they were contracted for, but couldn't do it, halacha l'maisa, again, you're obligated to pay them. Well, again, depending on this, you're obligated to pay them, but you're not obligated to pay them as if they did the job, if they didn't actually do the job. You're obligated instead to pay them in accordance with this standard that we call poel batal. In other words, what would be the wage that someone would take to not have to work? And that's the amount that you pay the individual. V'amar Rava. Those are some really interesting cases. Hayman da oger agurei ledavlo. So we'll say there was a guy. So I hired a worker to water a field, to irrigate a field. I will say, now watch this. V'asa mitra. And now it rained. We can relate to this. It's been raining for 7 years, right? So now what happens? So now this is a really interesting case. I hire Ruvain to water my field on Tuesday. So what happens? He shows up Wednesday morning. And meanwhile, the whole Tuesday night it rained. So obviously I don't need him to go ahead and irrigate the field. So what's the halacha? So besida depolim. So we'll say that, look, what are we going to do? That's part of the risk of the job. Right? That's part of the understanding. If it rains, obviously I don't need this service. So we'll say, by the way, and that doesn't have to be like stipulated. It's understood. It's understood. So if it rains, that's the loss of the worker. Good. What happens? Asanara. We'll say, what happens if, let's say, again, I hired him to go and irrigate the field on Wednesday, and Tuesday night the river overflowed and watered the field. What's the halacha? So psida de balabayis v'yohev leikepoah batal. So we'll say, ultimately, again, that's on the balabayis. Right? And therefore, again, the balabais would still have to pay the workers kipoah batal. V'amar Rava, Rava says, so we'll say there's a whole bunch of rulings by Rava. Amar Rava, hayman da oger agur ledavla. So we'll say, so ultimately, again, I go ahead and I hire workers to water my field. Upasak nara the yoma, bepalgud yoma. So this is fascinating. So I hire workers to irrigate my field, to water my field. What happens? So we'll say the way they're irrigating the field is there's a river that runs, or whatever, an irrigation pond that runs next to my field. What happens? So they're working on a Wednesday. Midday, the irrigation pond dries up. It just dries up. So now there's no more water to irrigate the field. So the Gemara says, so now what's the shaila? Now again, I will say this is the case. The workers, like we're ready to go. Like we're ready to work. There's no water here for us to finish our job. So the Gemara says, Ilo avid pasik psid depolim. So if the irrigation pond doesn't normally dry up, so then again, unfortunately, that's the mazel of the workers. Avid the pasuk. So we'll say now. Watch this. What happens if this irrigation pond does regularly dry up? So even a must upseed the polim, laban must upseed the babai. So we'll say then it depends. If the workers are local, so they know that this kind of stuff happens, then unfortunately, again, that's a loss borne by them. If they're not local, so therefore again they have no idea that the irrigation pond dries up, then Allah Lamaisa, that is going to be on the balabayis. Okay, but Amar Rava, we'll say again, all these just great employment cases. Rava says as follows: Hayman da agar agur la avidita, v'shalim avidita b'pagul yomer. We'll say another great case. I hire workers, right? I have a jet, and I will say now this is a case ultimately again of a schir yom, a day laborer. So I hire a day laborer. So I hire him for Wednesday a day of work. And I will say what happens? He finished the work I gave him by midday. Baruch Hashem, right? Fast worker, finished by midday. So we'll say, so now, but here what's the issue? I hired him for the day. So what's the halacha? So if I have other work to give him that is easier than the first work I contracted him for, then I can give it to him. Or work that is of similar effort, I can give that to him. So Rabbi said, this is interesting. I can't give him work that is harder than the first. In other words, whatever work I give him at the outset of the day, that kind of sets the tempo, that sets the tone for the type of labor I'm able to give him. So if he finishes up by midday, I could give him more jobs that are either of similar, we'll call it intensity, or lesser intensity, but not more. And ultimately, again, we'll say at the end of the day, even if you don't have any more work for him, you still have to pay him the day's wages. In other words, you hired him for the day, you have to pay him for the day. So the Gemara says, whoa, I have to pay him for the day, like the whole wage? But one second, why shouldn't I have to pay him like a Paul bottle? In other words, we'll say, remember again, any time, the model always seems to be that when you contract someone, right, and circumstances change and he can't do the work, you have to pay him, but you don't have to pay him the wage as if he did the actual work, if he didn't do the work. Why not? Why don't they just have to pay him like a Paul bottle? It was so fascinating. We're talking about the workers of Mechuza. They both say the workers of Mechuza, their trade was they carried around heavy stuff. They were able to carry around incredibly heavy stuff. The Gemara says, "Di'ilo avdi chalshi." So we'll say these guys, if they were not put to strenuous work, then ultimately again they would weaken. So they were constantly looking to build their muscles. So they had to. So we'll say, so for guys like this, there's no such thing as paying them kipoil bottle. Why? Why? Because they had no framework of poil bottle. Whereas their trade depended on them being constantly active. So I will say, what an incredible Musa Haskell from the workers of Mechuza. The workers of Mechuza understood that unless you are constantly building your muscles, right? Unless you are constantly building your strength, by definition, you weaken. There was no hasaka, there was no concept of, what do you mean a poel bottle? What do you mean someone who doesn't work? I will say, what an incredible metaphor also for our ruchnius, right? To become in our ruchnius like achlushe de mechusa. Incredible. Bnei Adam haragilim laseis masaos tamid ukishiyoshvin betelin kashalahen. It was difficult for them to be idle. Difficult for them to be idle. I will say, what a level to aspire to. Difficult to be idle. To be the kind of people who understand if you're not building muscle, you're losing it. If you're not building muscle, you're losing it. I will say the goal is constantly to push ourselves. The goal is to never be idle. The goal is to constantly be building muscle, because if not, you're losing it. So incredible. Amar Mar, Shamil Lahemes Masha Asu. So we'll say again, we evaluate what they did. We evaluate what they did. So we'll say, so remember again, the Gemara just telling us what's happening over here. So we just went through all these statements of Rava. And we'll say, now what the Gemara is doing is going back to the machlokes Tanakama and Rabbi Dosa. Right? So remember again, Tanakama and Rabbi Dosa, I hired workers to go ahead and harvest my field at 2 slime. What happened? They did half the job. They walked off the job after a selah. Rabbi say now it's a complicated. So remember again. So technically speaking, there's still four more dinarim of work, because the sell is 4 dinar. What's the problem now? The price of labor has gone up. It's going to cost me 6 dinar to finish the job. So what's the halacha? Tanakama says pay the workers their 4 dinar, and it's on me, the employer, to go ahead and hire new workers at 6 dinar. That's just what it is. That's just what it is. Rabbi Dosa says absolutely not. The additional price of labor comes out of the wage of the workers. So they'll get whatever is left over after I pay the workers to finish up the job. So now we're going back. Amar Mar, Shamalahanes Mashasu. So we'll say we evaluate for them. So when these workers walk off the job, we evaluate what they did. So Ketzad. So we'll say, how do I do this? Chaya Rivka dinarim. So we'll say, this is quoting from the Gemara before. So we're just going back now and picking apart the Machlokes Tankam and Rabbi Dosa. So Chaya Rivka dinarim. Now it's going to cost me 6 dinar to finish harvesting the field. No sin lahem sela. So I still have to pay the workers their sela, their 4 dinarim. So kasavi rabbanon yad pol al ha'alyona. Because we'll say, as we saw before, the rabbanon hold that the worker always has the upper hand. Yad pol al ha'alyona. So worker is entitled for compensation for any amount of work that he did, even though he's left me, right? He's left me holding the bag, right? I still have to hire new workers at a cost of 6 sela. So the Gemara says, O yigmuru malachton v'yitlu shnei slaim. Or what's the other option? The other option is the workers could finish their job and get their wage of 2 slaim. So the Gemara says, okay, that's obvious. Pshita, that's obvious. Lotzricha diyakar avidita. So we'll say, watch this. No, because what happened over here? In the interim, as we just said before, the price of labor has gone up. So the Gemara says, "V'imru polim." So now again, remember, the workers withdrew. So the workers, they harvested half of the field, and then they walked off the job. Va'azal balavaisu paisinhu. I go along, I appease the workers, I say, come on guys, come back to work, please. So Ma'al Detema, what would you have thought? Matsu amrilei kim if I sina daita de tafaslana igra. So you might have thought that now when the workers come back and they finish the job, they say, of course we were appeased, but we were appeased at what? The higher rate of labor. To which again, I can say, no guys, that's not how I appeased you. I figure, I'm going to give you lunch. I'm going to give you lunch, fresh coffee, right? So that when I appease you, I had no intention of paying you more money, right? The appeasement ultimately, again, is I'm going to throw in a meal plan. Okay, next. So the Gemara says, "Sela no stelim sela." If it was a sela, you give them back a sela. You give them a sela. The Gemara says, in other words, if there's a sela worth of work, you pay them a sela. So pshita, I understand, that's obvious. So we'll say, watch this. We're talking about now a case where the price of labor went down. So the Gemara says, "Dezala vidita meikara va'agrinhu bitafe zuza." Sorry, meikara va'agrinhu bitafe zuza. Uluvasof iyakra vidite v'kam bitfe zuza. So listen to this. Originally, right, when I hired the workers, I hired them at above market. Right? Labor was cheaper. I hired them at above market. And now we'll say, when they walk off and we're renegotiating or I'm appeasing them to come back, the price of labor went up. So Ma'al Detema, and we'll say, and now essentially the price of labor is exactly at where I negotiated with them. So in other words, when I negotiated with them, I agreed to pay them above market. Now the price of labor has gone up, so actually the wage I'm paying them is at market. So what would you have thought? Amrilei, the workers could say to me, Tafe Zuze Amratlan, Tafe Zuze Havlon. So the workers could say to me, listen, Silber, you hired us at above market. Now the price of labor has gone up. So now it happens to be the price of labor is what we're getting paid. You owe us more money. Because essentially in the spirit of the contract, you agreed to pay us above market. So now market's gone up, you owe us more money. Kamashman the amr lahu ki amri luchu tfeizuzi de lo havakim luchu hashtakim luchu. Now when I hired you more for above market, again I didn't know what you could do, what the market would be, but now the market's gone up. Now we know the price of labor, and that's it. I'm locking in my original price. So we'll say. So bottom line, what the Gemara is teaching us is, if you're able to appease the workers to come back, you don't owe them any more money than the original price of contract. That's what you owe them. That's what you owe them, because ultimately, again, that's what they were contracted for. Incredible. So Rabbi Dosa Omer, Shama lehen es masha asalei asos, haya yafeh shisha dinar, no silan shekel. So we'll say, remember again, Rabbi Dosa disagrees. What does Rabbi Dosa say? Rabbi Dosa holds that halacha l'maisa, in this case where they walked off the job, and now the price of labor goes up, I have to hire new workers, I pass on the additional labor cost to my workers, to my original workers, and I take that out of their wage. That's Shitas Rabbi Dosa. So Kasavar, why? Kasavar Yad Paul ala Tachtona. Rabbi Dosa says the worker has the lower hand. Now again, to be clear, this is not a din in the worker. What is it a din in? What is it a din? It's the Mishnah. Kol Mishane Yado ala Tachtona. Whoever reneges or changes the agreement, he has the lower hand. So again, just to be clear, Rabbi Dosa is not. This is not like a machlokes in laborers. So again, the Rabbanan hold the worker always has the upper hand. Rabbi Dosa says no. Whoever changes the terms of the agreement has the lower hand. Therefore, if the price of labor goes up and I have to hire new workers, that additional cost is taken out of the salary of my first workers. To which the Gemara says, "Oh, you can or again, my workers could come along, my initial workers could come along, finish up their job, and get their full salary. So pshita, it's obviously So we'll say, what's the case over here? The case over here is where the price of labor went down. V'imar balabayis. And we'll say, now watch this. In this case, I am pulling out of the agreement. So we'll say, so watch this. In other words, I hired workers. I hired them for 2 slud to go ahead and harvest my field. 2 slud is 8 dinarim. Now it turns out that I could actually get labor for 6 dinarim. Price of labor has gone down. So mid job, I cancel on the workers. The guys don't show up for work tomorrow because I want to hire cheaper laborers. So the Gemara says, now what happens? So now we'll say, the workers come and appease me because obviously the workers want to finish the job. So they come and they work it out with me. So we'll say, watch this. What would you have thought? Matzi amar adaita debitsari sulimi agroi. So we'll say, listen to this. I might have thought that when it comes time, so let's say, now fine, I make up with the workers, they finish the job. So as I said, one would have thought that perhaps when the job is finished, I could say to the workers, listen guys, I agreed to take you back, but I'm taking you back at the lower rate. The workers say, no, we're keeping the original price, but we just provided you better service. Service with a smile, right? Higher level of labor, right? Whatever it is. So we'll say, so again, you see the same theme. The same theme is that halacha l'maisa, when you go ahead and there's a rupture, we'll call it, in the employment agreement in the middle, and then everybody reconciles. Reconciliation is based on the original agreement. Now, of course, I will say, people could choose to go ahead and make a new agreement mid-employment, but that would have to be official and recognized. In other words, that would have to be articulated. It doesn't necessarily have to be written down, but it definitely has to be articulated. If it's not articulated, then again, the original agreement is in place. Incredible. Seller, no sale on seller. So I'll say, if it's a seller to finish the job and they finished up the job, you pay them a seller. Pshita, again, that's obvious. I'm not going to Rav Nassan, lo tzricha da'ozilu inhu gabe zuzi meikara. So I'll say, what's the case over here? The case over here is where the workers gave me a discounted rate to begin with. They gave me a discounted rate. Ulubasof zila vidita. And I will say, and ultimately now the labor market matches the discount. So the labor market matches the discount. So what would you have thought? So I say, so maybe at the end of the employment, I say to the workers, listen, guys, in the spirit of our agreement, you agreed to provide me with discounted labor. So originally, the discounted labor was X. Now the labor market matches the discount, so you should discount it for me even more. So I'll say, so bottom line, halachah keeps saying the same thing. No, it's not how it works. In other words, in the beginning, we didn't know what the labor market was going to be. Now we know. So bottom line is, we're locked into the original contract. So we'll say, so bottom line, what the Gemara keeps highlighting is, when there is a rupture and then reconciliation, so halacha l'maisa, we go back to the original contract. That's what's happening over here. Incredible. Amarav, halach Rabbi Dosa. Rav says halach is like Rabbi Dosa. Again, now what does Rabbi Dosa say? Rabbi Dosa says that when I hire workers to do a job, let's say I hire them to harvest the field for 2 slime. They walk off the job halfway through. I now have to hire new workers that are more expensive. Who bears the additional employment cost? Who bears that? The original workers. That comes out of their wage. That's Rabbi Dosa. Because again, Rabbi said, what's Rabbi Dosa's logic? Kala mishane yado ala tachtona. Whoever goes ahead and changes the agreement has the lower hand. That's it. So the Gemara says as follows. Good. So umiyamar Rav Hachi, did Rav actually say this? V'amar Paul yochal lachzor afil b'chatzi yom. So I'll say, watch this. Rav said, and bro said, we're going to talk about these sugyas. Where is this? This is. We started in Bava Kama. We'll see it again a little bit also. So listen to this. So Rav says that a worker, has the ability to walk off the job whenever he wants. Now both say, this is part of the idea of in Yiddishkeit, right, the only person you're an eved to is the Ribono Shel Olam. So an employee is not an eved to the employer, which means that an employee always has the right to walk off a job. You can't keep someone forcefully employed. Obviously, I will say there's a concept of avdos. Of course, there is a concept of avdos. But again, that's not employment. So the Gemara says as follows. But Rav says that a worker could walk off the job. Now, obviously, if we're saying that a worker could walk off the job, then what does that have to mean? That has to mean that he could walk off without any responsibility. In other words, I did my job, pay me for what I did, and that's it, I'm out. So we'll say, so that contradicts Rabbi Dosa. So okay, so maybe there's a distinction between a schir yom and a kablan. Remember, we spoke of this yesterday. A schir yom means a day labor, fixed wage for a day of work. Versus a kablan. A kablan is hired to do a job. We'll say, take a look at Rashi. It's actually the last Rashi on the daf. Shining lan bein schiros the kablanos. The gabe schiros isa la haytaima. The avadayhem for la avadim la avadim. Avad the kablanos in ze eved el yatzmo. Rabbi Dosa the kablanos ma'arikidana. So we'll say maybe like this. Maybe when we say that you can walk off a job whenever you want, that's a schir yom. If you're a day laborer, no one could force you to remain for the day. If you want to walk off the job, you can walk off the job. A kablan, it doesn't have that same much. A kablan actually is a contractor. A contractor is really self-employed, right? Because what's the whole cop of the kablan? We'll say the kablan. Remember again, when does he have to do his job? When does he have to do his job? Whenever he wants, as long as he gets the work done. That's his avoda. That's it. So maybe like this. Maybe Rabbi Dosa, when he says that you're responsible for going ahead and paying for any rise in labor, that's a kablan. That's a kablan, but not a schir yom. To which the Gemara says, does Rabbi Dosa really have this distinction? So let's listen to this. If I hire a worker and midday, Nebuch, he hears that one of his relatives died, or he gets sick. So what's the halacha? Im schirhu, if he's a hired worker, amud beis, no sin lo scharo. You pay him for what he did, and that's it. Right? We pay him for his work, and that's it. Rashi says, so we'll say again, if he's a day laborer, you pay him for a number of hours that he worked, and that's it. In kablanhu, no sin kablanuso. And I would say if it's a kablan, you also pay him his work. And I would say, what do you see from here? That when a worker is unable to go ahead and continue. Now I will say, granted, these are ones situations, right? These are circumstances where ultimately, again, there's an extenuating circumstance. Someone died. All right, the worker gets sick. So in that case, what's the halacha? Pay him what you're obligated to pay him, and that's it. So the Gemara says, money, whose opinion is this? If it's the Rabbanon, my area shama shemes lames osha asasochama the anis kilo anis nami ha'am Rabbanon yet paula alayona. So we'll say it can't be the Rabbanon. Why can't it be the Rabbanon? Because in general, the Rabbanon hold that the worker always has the upper hand. Right? So whenever the worker walks off the job, he gets paid for what he did. And even if there's an increase in cost to the employer, that's not his problem. So according to the Rabbanon, even for a non-ones circumstance, the worker could walk off. Ela lav Rabbi Dosa. Rather, it must be Rabbi Dosa. Shmamina lo shiny le Rabbi Dosa bein schiros lekablonos. So rather, it must be Rabbi Dosa. Rabbi Dosa doesn't make a distinction between a schir yom and a kablan. Schir yom and a kablan. Amra Nacham Bar Yitzchak b'Devorah Oven v'Divrei Hakol. So Nachman Yitzchak says, no. Maybe this case is a different situation. Maybe we're talking about Devorah Oven. So remember again, we saw this already earlier this morning. In a Devorah Oven, everything changes. So in a Devorah Oven, where let's say I hire a worker to do something. So most of the classic case the Gemara gives is I hired someone to take my flax out of the water. If you don't take the flax out of the water now, it's going to get ruined. Everyone agrees that by a Devorah Oven, a worker doesn't have the right to walk off the job. That everyone agrees with. But Divrei Hakol. So Tanan, we learned Kolam Mishana Yod. So we'll say, so therefore again, good. The Gemara is suggesting over here, good. So when we said the halacha is like Rabbi Dosa, really what it's saying is everyone agrees in the case of a Devorah Oven that a worker cannot choose to just walk off the job, as that is going to result in a potential tremendous loss for the employer. Fine. So the Gemara says as follows: Tanan, let's remember again, what do we learn in our Mishnah? So our Mishnah seems to espouse a very simple principle. Whoever changes the terms of the employment agreement has the lower hand. That's the halacha. So the Gemara says, zoche, bishlama, so bishlama kala mishana yada tachtona, the stam lantanik Rabbi Yehuda. So say, I understand the phrase that whoever changes the nature of the agreement has the lower hand, because we're reflecting the view of Rabbi Yehuda. And I will say, we did not learn Rabbi Yehuda yet. Right? We're going to see ultimately again Rabbi Yehuda in just a little bit. So the Gemara says, Ela kala chozer bo yada ala tachtona la suyemai. But I will say, when we speak about this concept that whoever literally again retracts, chozer bo, goes back on the agreement, yada ala tachtona, what does that come to include? Lav la asuye poel. So I will say, does that not come to include the case of a schir yom uka Rabbi Dosa? And I will say that even according to Rabbi Dosa, if halacha l'maisa again, even by a schir yom, if he changes the agreement, right, he has the lower hand. Ella Rabbi Dosa tarti kamar. Rather, Rabbi Dosa said like this. It was like the sheet of Rabbi Dosa is Rabbi Dosa holds both by a schir yom and by a kablan. If they change the terms of their employment, yadam ala tachtona, right? They bear whatever loss or whatever additional fees come out. Says that's Shitas Rabbi Dosa. Rabbi Dosa always holds if you are engaged, if you are in the employment of someone, whether you are a day laborer or whether you are a kablan, if you go ahead and renege, retract, change, you, right, the reneger, the retractor, the schir yom, the kablan, you have the lower hand. The Rav, Savala Kavasa Bechada, Upaligala Bechada. And Rav holds like Rabbi Dosa in one case, i.e. the Kablan, and disagrees with Rabbi Dosa in the other case, i.e. the Schir Yom. Okay. Another possibility is, when we say that anyone who goes ahead and reneges on the agreement has the lower hand, so it's very interesting. What is the case of reneging? Right, going back on the agreement. So we'll say, all right. So now we'll say we're opening up a whole new thing over here. We'll say, I just want to point out. So just understand what we are focused on over here is the fundamental machlokes Rabbi Dosa and the Rabbanan, which is in general, the Rabbanan hold workers' rights are paramount, and therefore again we do everything to protect the worker. And therefore, a worker has the right to walk off a job whenever he wants. And halacha l'maisa, even though it's going to cost the employer more money to finish up the job, that is borne by the employer, not by the employee. Rabbi Dosa says, absolutely not. Rabbi Dosa holds, whoever changes the agreement, right, yodo ala tachtona, he has the lower hand. And Rabbi Dosa apparently holds that it doesn't matter what kind of work you're talking about. Schir yom, day labor, kablan, a contractor, that's it. An agreement is an agreement. And if you change it, whoever changes it is responsible ultimately, again, for any additional costs which are incurred. That's our fundamental machlokes over here. Now, we'll say, so again, how we pass him, we're going to have to see. So that's the overarching machlokes. Now, throw in there another case that we just saw, which is, what happens if someone has to walk off the job because of extenuating circumstances? So we'll say, right, that was the case that we saw before. A relative died, someone gets sick. So Rabbosai, the Gemara makes it sound like that everyone agrees in that case that what? That Allah Chalamaisa, you're not held accountable for that. You get paid for any work that you did, and then you go home, take care of whatever you have to take care of. That's 2. 3, Rabbosai, seems to be that in the case of a Devorah Leah, right? If a worker walks off the job in the case of Devorah Leah, in that case, everyone agrees that what? I have to do whatever the employer, have to do whatever I have to do in order to get the job done. And if I incur additional costs, then everyone agrees that what? The worker incurs those costs. So those are just the 3 pieces to keep in mind. Because what I said, now the Gemara is going to transition to a different kind of case. The other possibility is maybe I will say when we say that whoever reneges on the agreement has the lower hand, dealing with the following case. So I will say, now totally different case. Here we go. But very interesting. So we'll say, watch this. I sell Reuven a field for 1,000 zuz. This is an expensive purchase. And Reuven gives me 200 zuz. Down payment. So we'll say, what's the halacha? I will say, if I renege on the agreement, because remember, I will say, money doesn't acquire real property, right? You need chazak, or proprietary act. So I'll say, so now what happens? So now Reuven gives me 200 zuz, and now if I, the seller, renege, so what's the halacha? Yad lokeach al halyona. The purchaser has the upper hand. Therefore, ratza omer lo tenli me'osi, o tenli karka. Watch this. So now if I, the seller, renege, that means Reuven, the buyer, has the upper hand, and he has a choice. He could say either, fine, you want to renege, give me back my money, or Tein karka keneged ma'osi, or give me land corresponding to my money. I gave you 200 zuz, give me 200 zuz of land. Mehecha magbio, and where does Reuven take his land? From mina idis, from the best property. Again, we have to define what that means. But I will say, let's say again, Reuven, the purchaser, reneges. Then Yad Mocher Al Ha'alyona. Then the seller has the upper hand. Ratza Omer Lo Helech Ma'osecha. So again, I, the seller, could say, Reuven, here, take your money back. Or Ratza Omer Helech Karka Keneged Ma'osecha. And ultimately, or I could say to Reuven, I'm not giving you back your money. I'm keeping your money. Here's 200 zuz worth of land. Mehechan Magbio. Ultimately, again, I will say, from where does Reuven take this land? Minaziburis, from my inferior property. Again, we have to define all of this. But watch this. So Rav Shmuel says, if you want to avoid this whole thing, right? I will say, here's the problem. What this seems to indicate, I will say, is that Allah L'maisa, when someone goes ahead and purchases real estate and then makes a down payment, it sounds like from the schema that what? The down payment does not make the transaction binding, right? That either party can still walk away. Rav Shmuel says, if you want to make your down payment binding, here's how you do it. Rav Shmuel we teach them to create a binding transaction. Keitzad, kosevlo, ani ploni ben ploni machati sad plonis leploni be'elef zuz, ve'nosan li mehem masayim zuz, v'hareni no shebo ches me'os zuz, kana u'machzu asashar afil la'achar kama shanim. So let's watch this. Rav Shmuel says, make a different kind of transaction. What's a different kind of transaction? Here's how it goes. I, Shmuel Silber, I'm selling Reuven a field for 1,000 zuz. Right? Reuven has given me a down payment of 200 zuz. At this point, right, the transaction is finalized and sealed, and the remaining 800 zuz is a debt that Reuven owes me. A mortgage. But I will say, what that does is, it shows that the 200 zuz down payment finalizes the transaction, right? The rest of it is a loan. All right, what's the duration of the loan? Oh, whatever the duration of the mortgage, whatever it's going to be. But the transaction is finalized, right? I will say, by the way, this is what we do by Mechiras Chametz as well. Again, this is the way generally our real estate transactions work. You down payment finalizes the transaction, and the rest is a debt to be owed. Shmuel says, if you structure the transaction like this, then halacha l'maisa, no one could retract. By Mechiras Chametz also we do this as well. By Mechiras Chametz, obviously the full value of the chametz is not known, so the Gentile can't pay for the chametz, so we make a down payment. But we indicate the down payment finalizes the sale, and the rest of the value of the chametz is a debt that is owed from the Gentile, from the non-Jew, to whoever the person who's selling the chametz, to the Jew who's selling the chametz. Incredible. Armar, so Mehecha Magbio. Our Basi, what we'll do is we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up again. We did excellent. Shkoyach to everyone. You guys did great this morning. You guys really did great. Right? So again, Baruch Hashem, we're good. Incredible Gemaras and Meretz Hashem. Really, tomorrow we have a shorter Amud Aleph. Tomorrow we'll be right back on track. Shkoyach everyone. All right, Chavra on Zoom. Have a great day, everyone.